Hello comic fans, here's Earl Grey. Welcome to my Time Machine Shelf Part 3. This is the shelf, the hugest shelf of the shelves in which I store my European comics. And since I think that one particular trait of European comics is that they are a bit more concerned about a true historic background than comics from other places in the world, I thought, hey, this would be a good idea to place them in this historic timeline sequence, if you will. And of course, there are many American comics and such that could be placed in it as well. And I'm very aware of that even many superhero comics have a particular point in the timeline. So maybe in the future I will put all my comics in some kind of sequence, I don't know. But as I've shown you in the two preceding videos, there are lots of comics from North or South America here as well, like Alan Moore's From Hell or Berlin by Jason Lutz. But now let's continue here. We ended with Dan Cooper and come now to Dieter Lumpen, a series written, I guess he's an Argentinian, Monsieur Centenaire, and drawn by Ruben Pelliero, who continued the Corto Maltese run. And whether you like the idea to continue this old classic series or not, he did a fantastic job with that, and you can see lots of similarities between his art and Hugo Pratt's art, and especially the ending, the last album that is collected here, has lots of nice fantastic realism vibes to it. And it is available in English by IDW or Fantagraphics, I'm not so sure, but it is available in English as well. Here a German crime comic by Isabel Kreitz, The Invention of the Curry Sausage, about this very important event. And a bit of Italian art comics here. Zillavengo. And Die Venusfalle, the Venus Trap. Very pop, modern, very stylish comics. And another comic by Annie Götzinger, very nicely made book about Dior and about the importance of fashion and a bit more. And of course taken by her fantastic art to another level, even though you may not be that interested in fashion, you will be interested, like you will be in this comic here, The Wife of the Sultan, done by her as well, about, a woman who has a love affair in China and some love adventures. So, next comic in line is The Things of the Heart, written by one Jean-Luc Fromental and drawn by Jean-Claude Floch, or however you pronounce it. As you can see here, it's an elegantly drawn comic about things of the heart, set in the late 40s, and that's where we are now, in the post-World War II times. About events in the late 40s is this comic here as well, but from a totally different angle. This is from a German cartoonist called Volker Reiche, who is very famous for his Stritz comics. I mean, we have very seldomly the occasion that we have here somehow famous newspaper strips, but he had a long-running series in the so-called FAZ. But this one here is about his upbringing in the struggles of post-World War II Germany, and it's very interesting. Then we have a yeah, crime comic by Jacques Tardi, written by Charles Verin. Deathly Games, or Deadly Games. 4-part series about these kids playing on the street and are involved in criminal acts. So one of the maybe lesser known Jacques Tardi stories, but came out here in these 4-volume set, and if you can get it, real nice. Even though it felt a bit like a cash grab at the time, why they hadn't put the whole story in 1 volume, since you really need all 4 volumes to appreciate the story or get it. So then we have 2 comics, Clownfish, of the series Clownfish. Don't know if this should be continued. And another of my very treasured Annie Götzinger comics, this time written by Pierre Christine, who is one of my favorites as well. I mean, I always come back to celebrate this comic here whenever the occasion is here in my videos, so this comic here should not be a new comic for you. Fantastic crime stories, or a crime story with a very specific historic setting and even some political background. So then we have one of these one-offs, or 3 of these one-offs by Hermann and his son Yves Hupen. Next book here, The Winter of the Cartoonists, actually, Draughtsmen, is about this group of friends who have to survive as cartoonists in the Spain of Barcelona, actually, during the Franco years. Yeah, highly interesting, written and drawn by Paco Roca, and with this cartoony / realistic art style. Then it's 4 times loustal, and I mean, his comics are not always easy to place in terms of a timeline, but these 4, I thought, have a certain feel of the 50s, so especially Besame Mucho, titled after that piece of music, has strong 1950 vibes. So, time to go to the last real huge shelf here. Maybe I should address another problem in terms of putting these in the right, correct timeline. There's no ultimative timeline at all. I guess you have figured it out already with me. But this one here is a very hard one to place in a certain place here. Ricochet, aka Rick Master. Really nice crime series. It's not the best comic in the world, like I always say, but highly entertaining, and sort of a crime story by this dude who is, when did these comics started, in the early 60s or so, and actually up to now with different creators that do their new take, modernized take on Ricochet, aka Rick Master, and he's a true blue, a bit boring maybe, protagonist, hero, but it's just a bit, it's whimsical, fun, hilarious crime stories, and sometimes really a bit interesting and sort of cartoony, realistic, cartoony, sort of who's done it comics. Maybe I can give you just one random page here to give you impression of the art. And the creators TB and Duchateau, they did this had done this over decades, so how you could place these comics. Each of them really breathes the time it was created. A bit similar is the thing here with Andy Morgan, drawn by Hermann, written by Greg, classic adventure series. It's not Hermann still at his peak, but a fantastic adventure series, highly entertaining, and yeah, ran over 13 volumes up to the end of the 70s, and it started somewhere in the 60s. So it's the same a bit like with Ricochet. It has a certain place in the timeline because it was created then and reflected the time in which it was created. A bit different though it is with this recent published comic by Barry Windsor Smith. A huge tome, one huge graphic novel, highly interesting, very impactful. I did a video about it. Monsters. And this is already one of my favorite comics from 2021, to say the least. Another comic that I did some videos about, one video about, is Mordcinder by Alberto Breccia and written by Hector Osterheld, about time travel and such, and it was created in the 60s as well. Monsters plays in, let's see, in 1964. So that's the reason why these books stand in that sequence here. Here's a more recent acquisition of mine, Jonas Fink by Vittorio Giardino, about the spring in Prague in 1968. That's at least the starting point. I haven't read these two books yet, but I'm looking forward to it, of course. And then we have another of these German crime comics called Waffenhändler, Weapon Trader. Another crime comic, The Secret of the Würger, Strangler, and a post-Linie Claire, or however, modern Linie Claire stylist Yves Chalin, and these are the collected. This is the collected edition with the adventures of one Freddy Lombard. So I guess we can move a shelf below. And here we have the Casseur, die Draufgänger, the Daredevils and the Destroyers in one person. It's a two-part team of detectives slash whatever, and think a bit about the streets of San Francisco, and it's a bit more whacked out because they're destroying the cars that they're driving with all the time. Then here's a pretty fun series, good looking for sure, but I really wish that the creator Vano would have taken more time, not just doing good covers and creating really nice and gorgeous art here. The storyline is pretty entertaining as well, but towards the end it's much too rushed and too convenient storytelling. So actually the ideas that he had with the series here, that it had the potential for a very good, let's say 10 or 12 album run, but two albums was just not enough for it. Beautiful comics by Smolderen and Clarice, One Diabolical Summer. This is set here in the late 60s, and it's reflected by the art. And it's again one comic that was done quite recently, but is an homage to the days way back then. So it's done in hindsight and very good. And believe it or not, this is all art that was done with the computer, but mimics collage or cut-out techniques. Fantastic. I mean, you can't do this actually with old-fashioned techniques so perfectly, but yeah, wonderful art. And 1 year without Cthulhu by the same team is, of course, some Lovecraft-inspired story, but yeah, reimagining of sorts, and using another story out of the real world and mix it up with. Then we arrive in the early 70s with Nada by Caban and Manchette, a political thriller about a leftist, anarchist, terrorist group who plans to kidnap an US ambassador. Then we have 3 books with comics by Edouard Aidon. There's one here written by Greg, Die Panther, the Panthers, about these 3 ladies who are friends with each other, and yeah, about them becoming successful in their different professions, and on the sideline having to solve some crime cases and action, and really entertaining. Bit of soap opera-ish, but no problem for me at all to enjoy that. And Tony Stark is, yeah, reflects these ecological concerns that popped up in the 70s. So this is a comic from that time as well, and when really a certain awareness for ecological problems occurred in the public mind. So, and these are comics about endangered species and about the polar regions and such. From today's point of view, pretty interesting, and nobody could say that we don't know anything about it. We are warned pretty long as of now. So more fun in that regard is Percy Pickwick, of course, aka Clifton, by Turk and de Groot, and there were different creators who picked up this franchise, and always very entertaining and goofy with this typical, stereotypical British secret agent. Then, oh, that is actually some older version of Andy Morton. Put them there. And some other comics I will show you pretty quick. Luc Lamarck, Die verzwickte Affäre, Jonas Valentin, Le Tendre, and drawn by Rossi, Der Stoff, The Stuff. Mick McAdam, one of these cartoony adventure crime stories. This Phantom Mask character there. He's obviously, he's a stereotypical Scotsman. So yeah, the European comics are pretty rich in using and exploiting stereotypes. No way around it. So, and Agent X9 is actually not only about the series Agent X9, but an anthology series in black and white that ran newspaper strips and other stuff, and put it together and published it for very few Deutschmark. Here you can see there's some selection of the comics within that. Got it later on, never saw them or can't remember just having seen them as a kid. In contrast to this one here, Gli Aristocratici, or how it is called in Italian, Gentleman GmbH, love them to death. The series here really sparked my imagination. So I'm very glad that the German publisher Phoenix started a new series with collected editions of them. Here I have them in some kind of mini format comics. I think this is somehow a European thing here as well, to rearrange the panels, or maybe it was just a German thing, to rearrange the panels and put them out in this pocketbook format. Not a good idea if you ask me, but just for the sake of goofiness and completeness, I can't pass them. So now to more serious stuff here. David B. and Tancarel. This is obviously a more recent comic, but set in the 70s, 75 to be precise, about bank robbers and heist, and with pretty interesting characters, as you can see. So it's not just about the action. Then a pack of tardis. I'm not so sure if they are all belong here, but they have a more or less a 70s vibe. Der Schnüffler im Visier. Oh, please spare me to. Killers don't introduce themselves. This one I can translate here. And don't know. I don't know. Here's a little bit of an Argentinian section with stuff by José Muñoz and Alberto Breccia and Carlos Sampaio, who wrote a lot of the stuff here. This is a more recent edition. I looked for the German one of the bar at Joe, or Joe's Bar, forever, and couldn't find it, so I had to get the French one here. And that's a nice thing here, for sure. And did a recent video about these three XIII books here. And in the comments I was informed that these three just cover slightly more than the half of the whole saga. So I had to get this book here, German translation of the stuff. And this is almost 700 pages worth of material, or more than 700 pages, reprinting the whole XIII saga. Unfortunately, a bit smaller. Now I have the whole story complete. And yeah, sort of, I went full on bonkers because Breccia and José Muñoz, they're really at the top on my all favorite lists of mine. So I went a bit wild and bought the Peramuse edition by Fantagraphics as well. I think I have to show you this one in a video soon. And compare it with my German older Peramuse books here. But XIII is a veteran of the Vietnam War, and Peramuse is a comment on the dictatorships, the regimes in Southern America of the 70s. So that's why they belong here in my collection. Then we have a series with straight crime comics, as you expected. Of course, a bit cliché, pulpy, just the way I like it, I have to admit. Now that I think about it, Zanardi, the alter ego by Andrea Pacienza, and who is the hero of lots of different Italian underground cartoons, stories, comic stories, very underground, pretty adult, pretty interesting, very inconsistent, but sort of, that's the thrill in this book here, that almost each page is drawn a bit differently. Maybe this book here should belong a bit below, because it clearly is a child of the 80s. Yeah, so now, truth be said, the more we come to our present day, the more wishy-washy it gets here in terms of the storyline, and I hope you forgive me, because this is not so clear-cut as I would like it to be, maybe. And or yeah, here we have one of these IKEA boxes, and everything falls apart here. The Free Comic Book Day comic book of Bruno Brasil. We come to that series later. One of adventure story. This is a rare one, because Jan van Ham usually writes longer lasting series. Stuff by Basilero I always pick up, because entertaining stuff. And Andy Götzinger's Barcelonite, and the social satire about the society of the late 68ers, if you will, or the libertinism of the 70s, maybe even 80s, by Lausier. As you can see here, his name is written in huge letters there, because he was some kind of a brand way back then, and not for only that stuff, but as you can see by this bored guy here, it's not so much about the sex, it's just about how you can survive with that much libertinism around you. So very fun stuff, a bit Woody Allen in comic form, the good Woody Allen. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for you, if you would want to read the stuff here, it's still in circulation on eBay, and you can get these usually as a bundle for almost free. So, and here we have the political comics written by Pierre Christine and drawn by Enki Bilal. Did a video a long time ago about these comics. May you want to check them out. They're really great. Then we have, yeah, some kind of James Bondish character, Bruno Brasil, in these very stylish collected editions. I wonder actually when did this series started. Yeah, late 60s, early 70s. So you can see the timeline here is a bit wacky now. But it's drawn by William Vance, and everything by William Vance I will pick up. Unfortunately, he's not longer with us. He died some years ago. And of course, his magnum opus, 13, written by Jan van Ham and William Vance at the peak of his game. Did a video about this, fantastic. Yeah, let's say espionage, conspiracy theory series with lots of fantastic twists, and you really have to have these 5 collected editions in German. And there were a lot of spin-offs about certain characters here of that series that I collect in that box here. And here's another comic from German creators, Karl Sturm and Dirk Thon. Unfortunately, these guys that publish these comics over here, usually they pop up for one album or so, and then they go to advertising or illustration or wherever they can really make money. Then another series that I recently reviewed in the video, Lady S. Written by Jan van Ham and drawn by Aymon. And here's another new series, not so new, but maybe the last series that Jean Van Ham wrote before Lady S, maybe, Wayne Shelton. And this is just the first collected edition with, yeah, the usual Jean Van Ham hard-boiled action stuff. Could easily made into some adventure action movie. Night Taxi, written and drawn by the German Matthias Schultheiss, is a pretty interesting story about voodoo in Hamburg. And look at that page. And it's pre-computer coloring, so even a guy like Matthias Schultheiss, who likes computer coloring nowadays, maybe a bit too much in my opinion. I will show you an example right there. He needed markers and felt pens to do this kind of stuff, and this was a good thing, especially if you compare it with Daddy, a hilarious take on the second coming of Jesus. But the coloring is really all over the place and very dark, and maybe it doesn't look that dark on your computer, but it's at places it's pretty terrible. But the story makes really made up for it, because we have Jesus as this huge Yankee guy, and he's accompanied by a little jester Hitler there. Who was taken from hell just to keep him company, and but our new Jesus here, the newborn Jesus, is not so bad, and he, of course, he sees the injustice in the world, and he tries to change it, and gets his problems with the church, because they have a good racket going on here, and why should they change it? So that's what they do. They crucify him once more. Sorry that I take a bit more of my time with this comic here, but it's a recent addition to my collection here, and I thought, hey, how could this comic, this totally out there, whacked out comic, be under my radar all the time? Then we have a bit of a fantasy, but with much realistic vibes, by Trio and Borbillo, Sick Bird. I guess I've talked about it in my video about Carlos Trio's comics written by Carlos Trio. So. And then one comic by the Spaniard Miguel Angel Prado, in which he explores the craziness in the neighborhoods and the normal, not so normal people and their dirty little secrets. One shelf below we have 3 series that have 2 things in common. For one, they all have a beautiful female main character, like the stewardess Natasha in Natasha, drawn by Waltery. And secondly, they have all this Ligne Claire thing going on. In case of Natasha's and Waltery, it's more this Franco-Belgian funny cartooning. Same with his other more modern character Rubina, who is a police inspector. And both series, Natasha and Rubina, are highly recommended if you can get your fingers on these. And lots of nice action and nice art. More classic cartooning in the Ligne Claire style is delivered by Eric Heuvel with his series January Jones. And now I see that this series is totally misplaced, because this series around this young aviatrice, I think it's the correct term. She drives planes, and these old-fashioned planes, as you can clearly see that this story here is set in the 40s, if not in the 30s. But classic adventure series, just fantastic, very nice to look at and highly enjoyable. Each 3 volumes are highly recommended. Wonderful stuff. I mean, if I can recommend everything else by Eric Heuvel, I don't know. January Jones is by far my favorite series of him. The Secret of Time, pretty fitting to today's video, written by Fritz Jonker, is a time travel story that didn't convince me in all points totally, but was okay, more than just okay. But since my expectations, because of January Jones were that high, it couldn't really deliver what I expected out of it. And same, sort of the same with Cabot about these baroness. And this belongs more into this timeline here, but I sort of have to figure out where actually I put this one here, because now we are almost in present day territory. Some of these stuff, the stuff here that feels a bit older for me, I've put that over here, and somehow that is more present for me, which is all relative, you know. When you're old as I am, stuff that has happened 2 decades ago, it's almost like it happened yesterday. So that's a bit difficult. So now, yeah. Then we have one book by Abouli and Bernet, not a torpedo comic, but pretty similar to that one. And I actually can't recall why I put this later here in the timeline, but I guess I had my reasons. So now stuff by François Buc. Oh, lots of stuff by François Buc. Horst Katzmeier, his French original name escapes me right now. Wife of the Magician, Devil's Mouth, of course, Little Tulip. I did a video about François Buc, and since I haven't spoken about New York Cannibals, a more recent edition, and I still have even more of by François Buc, so you have to watch out for more another video about François Buc in the future. Then a weird crime story called Carlotta, drawn by Alex Varenne. More by Jacques Tardi. As you see, he's all over the timeline, but this here about this fighter of insects, I don't know the term for that, feels a bit more set in more recent times. Straight on social satire is Abwärts, Downwards, and shows the social awareness of Jacques Tardi. I mean, this is always sort of the background and more or less palpable in almost all of his stories, his concern for the injustice in the world. Station 16 by Hermann. One of these good tardi clones. Yes, it was... No, I don't know if it was Moineau or Jean Vautrin who did these tardi-esque cartooning. Then we have a German, Marville, and sort of a mocking a bit the way Soviet school books were designed in East Germany, because he's talking here in this fine, very fine comic about his upbringing in East Germany in the times of around 1989. So here we have again a fixed time point in my timeline. So this stands here for 1989, and I think I have to do a bit of more of a rethinking about the timeline in this particular frame, as you can see here, but that's clearly there. And another book that takes place in the time when the Berlin Wall tumbled, and this is done by a German cartoonist called Flix, who was very modest in putting his name there, so small, because he's pretty huge, as much as you can become huge as a cartoonist in Germany. But he did a Spirou comic in his own style here, sort of like these homage volumes that you can get now for Lucky Luke. But this one, yeah, homage for Spirou, set in the time around 1989 or 1990. Then Carlos Trio written comics. These two here drawn by Eduardo Risso. And Vampire Boy, of course, drawn by Eduardo Risso as well. Then one of these more obscure series by Jean Van Damme. Frankly, everything that has the name Jean Van Damme on it, I buy it, even though he is more of a mainstream, considered to be more of a mainstream white writer over here. But I just dig his stuff. Another loustal, and for him this one is a bit unusual in terms of the format and maybe even of the time, maybe set in the 80s, early 90s. Here's the one that I almost looked for it everywhere, Paul Auster's City of Glass. I recently did a video about David Mazzucchelli and looked for this really nearly everywhere. Couldn't find it, but here I placed it. It's David Mazzucchelli's adaptation of Paul Auster's novel City of Glass. Then we have two albums by Friedman and Winninger of the series Lies and Ben. Sarajevo Tango by Hermann is set in the times of the Yugoslavian Civil War. And I guess I have to reread that one here. And do a new video about Hermann's comics, because I still have lots of comics, as you may figured out already, by Hermann that I haven't reviewed on my channel here. Next in line is maybe one series that is considered to be only second tier in terms of European crime comics, but it's one of my favorites nevertheless. Jackie Cotwitz, or the French original title is Jérôme Bloch. I mean, it's hard to sell a comic with this title here, and unfortunately to top it. When IDW tried to sell this to the English audience, they published the first 2 volumes, I guess, so far, or albums in English, and they're by far weaker than the rest of the comics. And sort of to get into the storytelling here, you have to read a bit more than just one album. You can't really judge this fantastic series just by one comic, one album. It is about this pretty unspectacular guy, almost your yeah, nice neighbor boy who happens to be a detective, and with his friends in the neighborhood, and very realistic. Daudier uses photographic references as for his backgrounds, and you can see that, but it's not bad at all. His cartoony characters make up for it and deliver enough comic feel that I really can dig it. And he has a long-term relationship with that girl, and it feels really real and modern and not cliché at all. I love the dialogues to death in this comic, and the stories are just nicely made. And he always gives his stories enough room to breathe and makes everything right, in my opinion. Yeah, just to give me a good, entertaining comic book. So now we arrived at the very last board of my huge shelf here. Yay! These are the two most recent collected editions of Jérôme K. Jérôme Bloch. Then we have Van die Zandi, Once Time, Once More, Hermann, about this morally pretty ambivalent businessman, and Basilieri with Barocco, and one German cartoonist by the name of Eric, and his main character, private investigator, is called Didier. Stylistically pretty interesting. Colors could be more intense if you ask me, but the stories are really fun. Then we have another crime comic by Isabel Kreitz. Then we have Love, Death and Other Cruelties. I guess he's a German. And stuff by Baru. Did a video about him. Oh, and even more Hermann comics, I thought. Van die Zandi was the last one, but we still have Full Moon Night and The Girl from Ipanema. Yeah, I really have to do more Hermann videos. And here we have a series called The Janitor by François Buc. I guess it's the last series that he has done so far. I mean series, written by XIII. And so far we have 4 volumes of that set, and yeah, this has to be included in my future video about François Buc, the second video about François Buc. Then Caroline Baldwin did a video about this female investigator, crime comics with this female main character, done by André Thémant. Wonderful series, and there are different editions out. I guess even in Germany we have a nice hardcover edition out. But I got this stack here as a bundle on eBay for pretty cheap, so I can't complain really. One series by John Bonham that cements his fame in a way, drawn by Philippe Franck, about this rich guy and yeah, a cross between James Bond and Bruce Wayne maybe. And as you can see, long lasting. I don't even know if the album 22 is really the most recent one. I have to check that out. More stuff from Miguelangelo Prado. Here we have his character Manuel Montano, and that one was written by Fernando Lua. And the daily the daily craziness, the daily insanity, and this is a quite matching title for the most of Michelangelo Prado's works, I feel. And then we have more cartoony stuff that is maybe just for of interest if you're German, but then you most probably have seen The Adventures of Woody, an underground, sort of underground, cartoony stuff here, but in full color. These were essentially one-pagers that appeared in certain magazines. I can't really recall where I've seen him before, but afterwards, when you have seen one or two Rudy pages done by Peter Puck, you will have them all. Art-wise, maybe not the most imaginative stuff, a bit stealing by Disney and wherever, but highly fun and entertaining, and always full of social commentary. A bit similar, but much more in this trip out world of, let's say, the Berlin techno world, is Hotze, drawn by or done by Bringmann and Kopetzky. For the most part, I think one-pagers as well. I know them as an edition in the music magazine Groove, with about electric music, dance music, and so this is quite fitting because Hotze is a DJ in a techno club and has pretty trippy adventures, as you can see here. Very dense storytelling, little panels, so he always has to squeeze in a whole story on one page that could fit into that groove scene. So, love these very much. And then, last but not least, one of the best series that appeared in Europe for a long time. And I don't say too much, really. The Vieux Porno, die alten Knacker, the old guys. About these old guys that still fight for their rights and the rights they believe in, so they still have a political heart, and each of them has a distinct character, and they still fight over their old love quarrels, and it's a joyful, fantastic, impactful read. So the series is now up to, at least in German translation, up to his 6th album. And so far it was just a pleasure. And it's written by Lupano, the same who wrote The Murder She Deserved. So there I said that this writer is someone who I have to follow a bit more, because The Murder She Deserved was fantastic, story-wise especially, and this one here as well. I mean, the art is great as well, but in this case the story is what it makes it really exceptional. And we have, not the last, we have these. This is a spin-off series in child books about the wolf in the underpants, in the slip. Der Wolf im Slip. And yeah, as you can see here, this is really a book for little children, but I guess for adults as well, because I had really big fun reading it. And almost forgot the adoption by Zidru and Monin about this kid that was adopted by Europeans, but sort of things developed in an unexpected way. So, this took me unexpectedly long. Bad segue, I know, but I'm finished. I hope I'm very, very glad that you made it up to the end. I'm very proud of you, and I'm proud of myself. Thanks for listening and watching. Goodbye.